Welcome to the Mindfully Gay podcast. I am Jerry Buie, and this is Yoga Master John Cottrell.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
And we were having a conversation about what we want to talk about today. And I thought, a pretty significant piece to our retreats, right, has been our yoga. Or your yoga. Not yogurt, yoga.
Yoga.
And I was thinking about this when we talked about doing this subject. So I thought a couple of things. When we do the yoga at the retreat, to me, there's this combination of body, mind, and spirit. It's definitely exercise, but you also kind of bring this meditative mindfulness process into it. And frequently, right, it sets up and it kind of initiates the process that we're taking the retreat. And then the other thing I thought about was how incredibly accessible you make yoga. Because I've seen people in our classes, in our retreats, who probably have never done yoga, who are kind of intimidated by the idea of doing yoga. And somehow you seduce them to showing up. And I just noticed that whenever I watch the group or participate, that everyone is into it, like it's accessible. And so I thought it was really important that we talk about this. And I noticed you're wearing your yoga outfit.
I thought I'd wear my M-Body tank top. This is my yoga brand and my yoga company. So I thought, well, I'll wear the t-shirt today too.
And it highlights your shoulders and arms, just nice.
And just to show off, a little shoulder today too. Well, thank you for saying that about my yoga practice, I call it my yoga teaching practice, that it's accessible, because that's my hope, that it is something that anyone can step into and feel at ease with it and feel comfortable with it, and certainly not feel intimidated by it, because I think that is kind of like one of the top 5 reasons why someone doesn't do yoga. I'm not flexible. That's number 1. It's too intimidating. I don't know all the phrases and all those poses, and it looks hard. I mean, all those things really kind of push people away from the practice. And I've been teaching yoga for well over 25 years now. And I feel like I've developed a style of teaching that hopefully is inviting, certainly accessible, and beneficial. And I really wanted to talk about the accessibility of it, but also the benefit of yoga, especially if you've never done yoga before, and how it might appeal to anyone, but also in particular to gay and queer men, bisexual men, trans men. If you're kind of contemplating or just thought, oh, no way, maybe, through this conversation, you might lean in a little bit to the idea of, well, maybe I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
Like the retreat, for example, I think part of the equation of that is, because I really feel, and I think you see this too, is that here's this moving thing. We're doing this exercise, there's postures, and we're moving, and there's it's yoga, right? And it could seem very separate from what we're doing at the yoga at the retreats, but as you hear me speak and teach and kind of give instruction and why we're moving this way, or moving from this pose to this pose, or we're even doing this pose, it coincides with the theme of our retreat, right? Because I see it in alignment with the other spiritual work that we're doing. It aligns with the ancestral altar that we set up. It aligns with the sweat lodge that we do. It aligns with the talking circles. And so I try to use language and from those components and add them to the yoga practice to make it pretty cohesive. So it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I think, I think what I've learned about yoga just with you and some other resources I've tapped into is there's always, and I've even noticed this even just when I work out, there's always some kind of metaphor to get worked out,
Mm.
right? Like the um, I'm thinking about there are times where I feel challenged in doing something.
Mm.
I think you've even said this, like where people are like, "There's no way I can do this pose," and then somehow you get people into that pose,
Mm-hmm.
and you realize I've watched it, I've experienced it, where the yoga flexibility is in my brain, right? The ability to be flexible in how I see myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is perfect for what we do with, I was
Mm-hmm.
going to say queer spirit, but I guess that's mindfully gay.
Right, right. Well, I know you've been practicing yoga, but I'm always curious because I think we can have our first perceptions or ideas of what yoga is. What, when you first knew about yoga, the idea of yoga, what was kind of the picture that was in your head about what yoga was or what yoga is?
Well, look, I'm Sicilian.
Okay, we say that like that's bad. Or you
Well,
about to apologize or something?
but I operate in this high octane, high, like, take me to the gym and make me sweat hard, and
Gotcha.
right. So when I thought of yoga, I always thought of it as kind of being like this soft old people kind, like water aerobics is, right? And I thought, well, eventually I'll want to be doing some yoga in my senior years.
Mm.
Here they are. Um, and then which is really interesting because somewhere 100 years ago, you convinced me to come to a yoga class.
Mm.
And I remember crying halfway through because it hurt. But I mean, it was intense, and I was like so surprised at it was a power yoga class.
Right, right.
But I thought, wow, this is a serious workout. No wonder John looks like a god. And yeah, so my initial impression was it sounded and looked very sedate, and then I learned differently.
Right, right. I think my earliest impressions of it, I think I was a kid, not even a teenager, but I was a little boy. Um, I remember, I mean, this is really going to date me. I had a little black and white TV, and I used to watch Jack LaLanne. Remember Jack
Yeah.
LaLanne?
Mhm.
He was just kind of an exercise guru that was on television and he was the exercise guy at the time. This is early 70s.
He wore tights.
He wore tights. And not that he did yoga, but that's just the era that I'm just thinking of, where yoga to me was something that hippies did, or the image or the picture was often like an old skinny Indian man with a very long beard, and he's probably in his 80s or 90s, right? And he's sitting in a lotus position, he's meditating, or maybe if he's in a pose, he's got his legs behind his head, and he's in some kind of pretzel like thing. And I think those were my first ideas or impressions of yoga, and just it never really appealed to me, even though I was exposed to exercise pretty early and loved exercise and gym kinds of things and calisthenics and all of that. But yoga was never in that equation until much, much later. Much, much later. Um, I wasn't officially introduced to yoga until um, probably like 1999.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard the story of your birthing
my,
process.
my, my birthing process. So it was like 1999. And at the time, I had been in Utah for about 4 or 5 years already, and going through my psychology internship. I decided to stay, had a couple jobs, but moving from California to Salt Lake, I moved away from dance. I moved away from some gym things. When I went to the gym, it was all aerobics anyway, because I love dance. And so I ended up getting a job teaching a fitness class at this little gym down in Sandy, Utah, right? And it was great. It was a lot of fun. And then at some point, the owner of the gym started teaching yoga, like right after my class, the class that I taught. And I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting. Let me give it a try. Just kind of out of the blue, not knowing what it was, but it, was something that I knew of back in the 70s, never tried it, didn't even know what it was exactly, and took a class and was instantly in love with it. And what made it so appealing to me was one, it was if you look on the schedule, it was just called yoga. It was like nondescript,
Mhm.
just yoga. Okay. But the yoga that we end up practicing, I later found out, was power yoga or power vinyasa yoga, which it flows, it moves. There's these transitions, easily moving from one pose to the other. Each pose made sense. And so to me, it felt like dance. It felt like choreography. And that really brought me back to some of my roots as far as movement and dance. And so that was the appeal for me. I was like, ooh, this is nice. I like this. And so I started practicing. And the funny insight I had was, as a dancer, because I danced before that, I thought I was really flexible. I was a young guy, but I thought I was really flexible. I started doing yoga. I was like, I'm not that flexible. And um, so that was kind of the introduction, and I practiced for a good year or so, and I was encouraged by one of the teachers there, like, John, you should teach yoga. I'm like, teach yoga? Don't you have to go to India to learn how to do all this stuff? And they're like, no, 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 no. They have like these teaching programs here, like here in Utah. Like, yeah, they have them everywhere. Like, really? All new to me.
Mhm.
And so at the time, I took uh, a weekend course in how to teach yoga. That's not how it is today. You have to have 200 hours
Mm.
to get a certification in yoga. Back then, they didn't have those certifications, um, and it took a weekend for me to learn the very basics of yoga, and I started teaching. But I eventually started teaching. So I taught at that same little gym for a good long time. Then later got a job at an official yoga studio where I really got nourished um, in the kind of the yoga philosophy and just beyond. All I learned how to do and teach was the sun salutation. It's just a series of like 8 or 10 poses. That's all I knew how to do,
Mhm.
basically. And that's all I knew about yoga. And maybe a few other poses outside of that. But then I took an official yoga teacher training and had a wonderful instructor that really allowed me to, I think, flourish, I think, as a teacher and grow as a teacher. Because one of the things that she proposed to me and all of the people that we taught to be teachers was find your own voice. I'm going to be teaching, here's the platform, here's the base, here's the foundation, but grow from that. Whatever your voice is, insert it into this foundational piece and make it your own. And so all the instructors that came out of that school, we're still all teaching, and most of us still teach together
Mhm.
as a unit in Salt Lake here, but we all have our own little technique
Mhm.
because we're teaching from our voice. So I mean that's kind of in a nutshell.
James is part of that group?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah.
Because he did the glow in the dark yoga or
He did
something.
glow. Yeah,
Yeah.
James Hardy, a wonderful instructor. We have the same teacher, but he's musical and a musician, and so he uses a lot of music. He did glow in the dark yoga, and just some other wonderful concepts that he's
Huh.
brought to his practice that makes it very appealing because it's him. It's very him.
Yeah. Do you still keep in contact with your teacher?
No.
Oh.
Unfortunately, we had a falling out.
Todd.
It's okay. It's all good. But I think the most important thing, actually, just the other day, I was reminiscing with one of those other teachers and how actually wonderful that part of our lives, really was because we learned so much, and it really did set the foundation for I think how and who I am today. Um, and yoga did that, and I can
Mm.
talk a bit more about that because I think it's that I think can be the enticing nugget, I think, for people who are just wondering about this thing called yoga. But something really grabbed me, and it grabbed all of us. Um, but yeah, we were reminiscing and just how wonderful the whole experience, the 10 or so years that we worked together, uh, until there was this, we disbanded, but the core unit of teachers have stuck together, and we're still together. We've been teaching together for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we kind of were talking, I can't remember if we did it on or off camera, but the question is, how can yoga, like, how does yoga serve gay identities?
Yeah. I think, the things that we've talked about already on this podcast, I think we certainly have talked about things like coming out, things that are very unique to, I think, our experience, like coming out, our gay blessings and gifts, things like that. But we've also touched on issues like shame, fear, anxiety, just those heavy emotions that we also deal with. And I think in a very unique way, not that we are different from kind of the rest of the population in that regard, but we have our unique stories and layers of that we live with and continue to live with. And I think when you're looking for, because when we've talked about shame or anxiety or fear, we certainly have talked about what that is, but what's the antidote? How to work through it or out of it. And if you're still searching for that antidote for any of those things, consider yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And if a question mark just popped over your head, well, yoga, how would yoga help? Because yoga comes in so many forms, and I want to say up front that I think, and not only think, I know that yoga is accessible and can be accessible to any body. In body meaning any physical body. Um, so start to, if you think, oh, I'm not flexible, or I don't have that fit, flexible, skinny bod that yogis look like. Well, that's a myth in a way. Anybody can do yoga, so wipe that from your slate.
Well, and I'm gonna tell you, one of the yoga folks that I've been following online is a woman by the name of Janelle.
Right. Yes.
She is a big girl,
Mm-hmm.
but I am so impressed at how she moves.
Right.
And the strength and the agility, and just watching her class makes me want to celebrate.
Absolutely.
Bodies.
Absolutely. And I've experienced the same, both instructors who are bigger bodied, you would think, oh, there's no way, right? And you're like, and they're blowing you out of the water. And same with students, just folks you wouldn't think just by looking at them, because they don't fit that yogi mold or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be surprised, because there's certainly things that it looks like I might be able to do that I cannot do. My body just is not able to do.
What?
Where another person of a different form and shape, no problem, right? So physicality, especially in a moving practice like that, like the one that you take, or the types that I teach. There's certainly, yoga as we know it, in the most part, is something where you're on a yoga mat, usually, and we're doing poses. And that's just probably a basic idea of yoga. But like I said, it comes in many forms. It might be a moving style of yoga, but there's also other styles. Maybe just need that calm, restfulness, restorative, meditative practice. And there's certainly that in yoga. I just want to sit and meditate. Yoga is meditation.
Well, and I'm, I haven't had a huge array of exposure to yoga, mostly you, and then the online thing that I've been doing. On the online thing, it's interesting. I'll have 3 people. The person leading the class is kind of like showing the top-notch version, if you will. But then there's like, here's this person who's going to show you how to get the benefit of a lesser degree of it. And I know I've seen you do where you say, okay, here's what we're going to do. And everyone gasp. No, but then you'll say, okay, but here's variations of that.
Yes.
That are going to serve purposes. And kind of the overarching message that I hear is, listen to your body.
Yes.
And cooperate with where those things are at. And I think it's been that encouragement that I remember I took a class, I think last winter or so with you. And I remember coming back saying, oh my God, like I was surprised at what I could
What you could
do
do. Mm-hmm.
um, at that point in my fitness journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I always kind of leave yoga or your classes thinking, wow, look at what I did.
Right. And and that's part of that accessibility. And if you're worried about your physicality and think, oh, I don't think I can't do that. Because and I do I'll set up a situation just like I showed you in that class. Like I'll be teaching and I'll have the class pause. We've warmed up, done some sun salutations, just some movement, some breathing, that kind of thing. Then maybe I'll have you sit down, right? Watch this, because we're going to do this pose and I'll go through some dynamic, movement where my hands are on the floor and my knees are propped up on my elbows and the leg is extended in the air. It's something very dynamic, and like you said, you might gasp, and others have. But I do that on purpose, and just to show, this is the potential. This is where you could go, but
Mm-hmm.
we're going to break it down. We're going to break it down in small little pieces, little edible parts that are digestible to help you get to this point. Even if at the end of the class you're not able to actually do this particular pose, you've made the steps toward it. That's how I teach. And so then I begin to break things down into smaller parts. Um, if it's going to be some kind of handstandy kind of thing or something, we're going to need some good arm strength and shoulder and chest and back strength. Well, that's what I'm going to focus on in the first first quarter of the class. How to place your hands on the floor, how to engage your arms and squeeze to your center and engage your core, and all these things to help you achieve your goal, whatever that goal might be for that particular posture, whether it's to reach that pose or somewhere along the way. And here's my secret. The secret is I use I call it the Karate Kid method. If you know the original Karate Kid movie, um, the teacher is teaching his young student, but and the students like, why aren't we in the studio actually doing the kicks and the chops and all that kind of stuff? What are we doing? Because the teacher was having them like wash windows and wax thing. Remember, wax
Wax on,
on,
wax off.
wax off, wax on, wax off. It was just that over and over and over again. And the kid's like, what the heck are we doing? Until he was in the ring and he would wax on and wax off for his blocks. And then it was crystal clear. That's how I teach. It's the wax on, wax off method. We'll do some poses and sequences over and over and over again. And what your body is getting acclimated to certain movements and flow. We're warming up the hips, your shoulders are getting warmed up, you're learning how to engage your core and all this stuff. And then I throw this pose at you. And then you're able to do it. Well, and you're surprised, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, how am I doing this? What describe your reaction, because you've had a moment like that where I taught, you did the pose, and I know you had a reaction when you did the posture. I mean, in real time.
I'm like, bitches, look at me.
Yeah.
But there were two parts. There was this part where I had to talk to myself in the capacity to say, you don't lose by trying. Right. And then when I found myself doing it, I was just like, yeah, like, who knew?
Right.
Who knew that I had this capacity?
Mm-hmm.
And then the walk away from that is, in what other parts of my life do I stall or don't put myself out there because I've already assumed I can't do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think, well, I did it in yoga. I did it at the gym.
Yeah.
Why can't I do it in this relationship dynamic or whatever?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That becomes the real life circumstance. You're in yoga, we call it a practice. You're practicing these movements and breath flow and gestures and postures you're practicing,
Yeah.
but you're practicing for real life.
Well, and I think this is really important because I know we're kind of focusing on the physical attributes of things. And I've talked to people about this because people see what I do on that spiritual level and they think, well, how do I obtain that kind of a thing? And what I tell people is you have to find what works for you. There's no, this isn't Mormonism where there's one and true way, right? That everyone finds their connection to spirit. And so I said, this is how I have found mine, and I'm willing to share that. But then I'll say, I have a friend, John, who his spirituality is his yoga, is his meditation. Like that is how he accesses that divine part of himself. And some people find it hiking. Some people find it in the gym. It's like, where do I find it? And I think it's really important, like what I've heard in your classes, and even to some degree, even on the online platforms. And I would suspect there would be some truth with some other yoga instructors too. But in particular, I've just seen you do this really, it's almost prescriptive. Like when we get towards the end of the retreat and you're doing like maybe the final yoga class, it almost feels like it's prescriptive, tying together all the components of what happened, which you don't really know what happened until we're there. And then it's just interesting. I've just kind of watched you like prescribe the yoga part of it that seems reflective of everything else.
Yeah, that's, I don't know how to describe that and how I'm able to do that, but part of it is, as you mentioned, this is my spirituality, and this is my gay gift, and this is what I have to offer the world, and I really do see myself as a vessel, and it's through this process, this vehicle of yoga, that's helped me to access that. And so when we have the retreats or other kind of ceremonial things, it's, I'm tapping into that spirituality where I'm seeing all that's been happening in our circles and the ceremonies and all the things that we've done in that weekend, and being able to kind of wrap it all up and summarize it and put it in a nice little package in this little yoga segment that hopefully is prescriptive, that, take this with you, try this at home, try this on the road, try this at your work.
So is that true of, and this, I really don't know the answer to this, right? I know that's how you approach it. Is that the platform of yoga, is the core or the non-appropriated version of yoga, the body, mind, spirit connection? And like even like Lotus and some of the other positions seem to be very much about like an alignment of chakras and the aligning of energy points. Even some of the other stuff that you do, I've even seen you in lodge bring in yoga-ness. But I guess I've never really understood that component of it.
Right. I would answer that by saying, if we had to start this podcast over again, I talked about my understanding of what yoga is, at least to me, and what I'm desiring to teach and offer my students. I'll say something like this. Yoga has taught me how to access the subtle parts of myself. Yoga is an opportunity for you to create and gain and abstain, or obtain and sustain a deeper connection with yourself, much deeper connection with yourself, to be more aware of yourself. Yeah, we can be aware of this physical body, some of the thoughts. When I'm sick, I have a cold, or I'm sore, something like that. Yeah, we can have that awareness. But yoga has the ability to take us even deeper, to get below some of these levels and layers of what this is, even beyond the physical. And I think that is the yogic philosophy. It's an avenue, it's a pathway, it's a journey towards enlightenment. bliss, to have this connection, not only just a connection with the divine, but to realize that you are the divine. You are divine. And here's some ways to get there. And there's many ways to get there. And an easy way, or the easy starting point, like if you're using a game board or something like Candyland, just as an example, you have a start and there's a finish, right? And you're at the starting point. For yoga, it's let's do these movements because we know our physical body, and then and if we start here and access this, the physicality, and have a consistent physical yoga practice, something shifts. We start to peel away those layers and realize, oh, I'm more than just this physical body. I'm an emotional body. I'm a analytical body. I'm a thinking body. I'm a spiritual body. And we're just peeling back the layers to discover all of those things. That's what I think, that's what I know yoga to be. It's that pathway from the physical to the ethereal.
So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, have you ever seen those shows? Like maybe there's like a little glass box and some yogi gets in there and like goes into this mental state, but they put their whole body in the box and they sit there for 4 days.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a box?
Well, it's funny because that goes back to that first image of what I thought yoga was just these contortionist kinds of things. No, I don't have a box. I could not get into one of those boxes.
Well, but see, I always think about, right, we see people who do those kind of extreme things where they can like lay on a nail of beds. No, a bed of nails.
Yeah.
Right. That came out so perfect.
It just sure did.
Right. But, and my assumption, just as an observer, is somehow people are able to kind of suspend like the belief of what my body can do and give it permission to go beyond it.
Yes, absolutely. That's it. That really is it.
Yeah. So that's the spiritual component, the mindfulness component, is to get out of the way of your own pain.
Get out of the way of your own body, get out of the way of your own pain. And I think that's why I think it's so beneficial to gay and queer people, because if you are feeling burdened by some of these things, your own bed of nails that you're always lying on and you're, in agony over it, how can, what are some of the access points, or what's the journey or pathway to not feel the pain all the time? Yoga has those components to take you there. And I do say, if you have a consistent practice, it's not just going to take a one-time, thing at a yoga class to have that magic moment. It might grab you and encourage you to continue going. And I would say, continue going.
Yeah.
Have a regular practice, even if it's just once a week. That's a regular practice. If you're going once a week, you're going to benefit. And not only are you going to get into your physical body and know your physical body better, but there's something I can't really describe, but it's quite magical in a way, where you start to access these other parts of self. Another thing that I do, not only do I teach yoga and teach classes kind of in the traditional sense in that way, but I'm a certified yoga therapist. And so I'm trained as a psychotherapist, and then I got trained as a yogi, but there's also something called a yoga therapist, which is different from being a yoga teacher. And so I didn't take a training, long story, I won't even get into that, but I got certified as a therapist, yoga therapist, but I use my Western philosophy of psychology in my practice along with this Eastern philosophy. And so one of the things that I do in yoga therapy, if I was working with a client, a student, is just like in talk therapy, how are you doing? What's going on? What brings you here? Tell me your story. And as I'm listening to their story, they might be saying, oh, I'm anxious. I'm listening to how that manifests for them. And But also, what I'm thinking in my head is, okay, here's their story. Here's how they experience anxiety and how they feel it. But one of my first questions is, you talked about how, what anxiety is for you. I'll say, where does it show up in your body? Where does anxiety live?
Mhm.
Where does it sit? Where does it show up? Oh, my heart just, a flutter, and I just get and I get shaky. Okay, so I take that into, you know, the whole concept of things and what we're going to do. So when we get to the yoga part, I'm going to be doing perhaps some heart-centered yoga postures or breathing for sure. I certainly do breathing when we do anxiety work. But as far as poses, you know, I'm doing some heart opening, back bends, mild if they've never done yoga before, but also ways to kind of calm that as well. Um, so I'm thinking kind of on physical terms,
Mhm.
you know, how does the anxiety manifest or show up in the body? And then I'm going to focus on that body part. One thing that I've learned in yoga is that we store a lot of emotional energy in our hips and this section of our body. And if you think about the chakras, that makes a lot of sense as well. So it's the emotional center down through here. So we hold a lot of tension here and tightness and soreness. And so in yoga, there happens to be, you know, I don't know, hundreds probably of hip opening yoga
Mhm.
positions. There's so many because we hold so much in in this physicality that we need lots of options on how to open that up, release it. If you're tight in your hips or something and you have some emotional bind, you know, we're going to work your hips. And so if your hips are this, my fist, if you're watching this, just a tight fist with some movement, breathing, we're going to start to release that tension so it opens up, and whatever's stored in there, that emotional ball of energy, opens and can release.
Mhm.
And you're free from that. Um, and that's the magic of the yoga, where you unleash, or I don't know how to describe it, just kind of this.
Right.
Yeah, my teacher used to say, "We're going to crack you open." We used to have yoga retreats, and they were pretty intense. It was like, "We're going to crack you open," and that's what would happen. You would be cracked open and just, and just you saw and felt just all the stuff that was in you, just stored away, packed away, and through movement and breathing, you're releasing that. And what's left is something brand new. Okay. And I like to say, what's left is your truth, your true self, your authentic self. And then you can start to nurture that and who that is. So if it's shame, that's that ball of energy and you want to release, once that is gone, then you can show up.
Yeah. So there's that spiritual mindfulness
Mm-hmm.
body connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Yeah. And even just kind of going back to, well, that's even that, it sounds intimidating. It sounds a little scary.
Getting cracked open?
Well,
Nah.
in an intense way like that. Yeah, that is scary. But you don't have to, if you want to go, if you're just curious about yoga, and if your intention of going to yoga is, I have tight hamstrings, well, go to a yoga class because you're gonna get a wonderful stretch.
Yeah.
And if that's your intention for going to yoga, perfect. That's perfectly legit as far as a reason why to go to yoga. I have a bad back. Some yoga postures might help with that. Do that, okay? And then you may stop doing yoga after you felt better, and that's fine too. But if you kept a consistent practice, like I said, you're going to get a little deeper. You're going to learn about breathing and how pranayama, the breathing practice of yoga, really does help nourish the body and
Mm.
mind and your spirit. There's other styles of yoga, not just physical. There's one of my favorite styles, and in a way, you practice it in lodge. It's called, and we know Lorraine,
Yeah.
a good friend of ours who passed away, unfortunately, but she's a yogi. And her practice was bhakti yoga, which is the yoga of I just lost the word. Um, it's devotional. It's devotional yoga, and it's done through song and music and singing.
Mm.
And so that was her style of yoga, bhakti, and it was in this form of kirtan. And kirtan is that call and response. You know, when Lorraine would have her instruments set up, wonderful musician, she would play and she would sing and call out, and we respond. That's yoga,
Mm.
because that's energy, the singing, the vibration, and all of that. And if that sounds appealing to you, try that as your yoga practice. And like I said, I think this is why I like Lodge so much, because I love the songs in Lodge.
Mm.
That's bhakti yoga for me, because of the vibration of that and the energy behind the music, the drum, um, the sounds, and all of that. That's medicine to me. And so I see the yogic part of it, and
Mm.
there's also the indigenous part of that, right?
Yeah. Well, what I think is interesting, and yoga philosophically is not something that I've dived into, even though I've always kind of suspected that there was some kind of like indigenous, more um, organic approach to yoga that's kind of been lost through capitalism, right?
Sure,
But
absolutely.
whether I'm in Mongolia or in a yoga class or in a sweat lodge, right? All these components, which, for instance, take what we just talked about vibrationally or energetics,
Mm-hmm.
right? What yoga cracks open,
Mm-hmm.
a lodge can crack open.
Exactly.
Plant medicine can crack open.
Exactly.
Isn't it interesting that somewhere in this kind of indigenous philosophy or cosmology, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
is the idea of opening.
Yes.
And to me, when I think of opening, I think of liberation. When I think of liberation, I think of finding renewed opportunity, renewed opportunity to rebrand, to redefine, to
Yes.
find more authenticity.
Yes.
Right. And I'm hearing,
Mm.
because there's been times, I think I told you, every time I watch Janelle, I cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, I don't know why. It's not that hard of a workout, right? But there's just something about finding that flow with my body, with the energetics of what's
Yes,
happening, that
exactly.
seems to, it's somewhere in Savasana when you're resting. I just think, wow, like just I think it's interesting. Savasana is always interesting to me, because when I watch it on TV, what I want to do is like, okay, well, who has time to rest?
Mm.
And then what I'm learning and working with Nick, and I've been following some kind of information through my, right, that
Mm-hmm.
the resting is
Mm.
still an active discipline,
Yes.
and that the body needs to have savasana just as much as it needs to have activity.
Absolutely.
And so here lately, I've been forcing myself to do the whole 3 minutes of savasana.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's so important. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we it's just kind of in regular day life, and I can speak certainly personally about this, just very active life, doing, and we can get caught up in things. And I know for me, and I even talked about it in our last episodes, um, it allows me, when I get wrapped up in things, then it distracts me from what I really need to be working on emotionally, right? It's a wonderful distractor if I keep myself busy.
Mhm.
But I think that's just kind of a common thing, right? We just keep ourselves busy and going. We don't allow or give ourselves permission to rest. I mean, really rest.
Mhm.
Yeah, you might go to bed at night, get a few hours sleep, and get up and do the whole thing over again. But do you take active moments through the day to pause, to stop, to rest? Because it's so important, energetically, mindfully, all of the things, physically for sure. Heart health, mind, everything. You need to rest. And that brings up just another style of yoga. You can go to classes called restorative yoga or yin yoga, or yoga nidra. These are all yoga practices where you're lying down with the encouragement of rest. Rest your body, let go, disengage. Yin yoga is about disengaging your muscles. You're not engaging and doing all these powerful movements and postures. You're resting. In Restore, same thing. We've got pillows and blankets and all these wonderful cushions to support your body while you're lying down.
That would kill me. No.
Resting. In giving, in usually yoga classes end in Shavasana, having that last few minutes, depending on who the teacher is and how much time is spent in the other part of the practice, there's a moment of just lying on your back on the floor, resting. And for me, the idea is, and I sometimes will say this in class, I'll say something like, wonderful, you've done your work. Be proud of yourself. You've got through this practice. You've done your work. Now it's time to rest. You deserve rest now. So lie down and find a comfortable place on the floor. Use the pillows, use the blankets to support your body and rest. And then in your meditation, because it's also a meditation, allow all the things that you've cracked open, because you probably cracked open some things, or you've at least, took a peek behind some areas that needed some attention and open them up. And you feel some release. You can let that go now. Just let it seep into the earth because you're lying on the ground. Give it to Mother Earth. Give it to Pachamama. Give it to the ground. And when we awaken basically from that rest, we feel renewed, refreshed, liberated, in stepping into our new selves. And take that with you. Don't leave it here on the yoga mat. Take it with you. Whatever you learn, even if it's just one little thing in this yoga practice, one little message or a thought or a cracked open moment, take that with you. That's your lesson for the day. But mainly, you need that time to be still, be quiet, and rest. And that's what I've learned for myself over the years in teaching yoga, practicing yoga, and try to integrate into my life is I need to pause, be quiet, rest. Because when I do, and I encourage others, because for me, when I practice that stillness, answers come to me. Truth comes to me. Knowledge comes to me. A knowing comes to me.
So I think it's fair. Well, what I want to say is, by having this conversation, we're letting people know who are listening to the podcast. Maybe people have thought about coming to our retreats. We have one coming up in September. And I think this conversation gives people some context of how we approach the yoga piece of this, the benefit of it, and how that might kind of inform them about what to expect with the retreat. It is coming up in September. I imagine this will be airing sometime in July. Yeah. And so I want to encourage people to go to the website and look up the retreat for September. Sign up. We have limited space, but this will be a good piece of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely.
We start every day with yoga.
We start every morning with yoga, and then there might be a little afternoon thing, but and you even said it, and I've mentioned it earlier, just how all the practices that we do are all intertwined. They're all interrelated. Yeah, as far as the ideas, concepts, and what were the goal of the whole thing. The lodge and the ceremonies, the talking circle, the altar, the yoga. They're all related. They're all related. Yeah, it's just a piece of it. I do want to mention that if you are interested, not only in just the retreat, but just in yoga in general, maybe at Yoga with Me, if you happen to be in Salt Lake City, I do teach in Salt Lake City. I teach at a studio called Mosaic Yoga. That's the team that I've been teaching with for the last 20 years. We have a studio space in Sugar House. We're called Mosaic Yoga. You can go to mosaicyogaslc.com. I think that's our website. Check out our schedule and see when I teach.
And then your YouTube channel.
I have a YouTube channel. So if you're not able to come to a studio or you're not in Salt Lake, I have a YouTube channel and I've got, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of yoga videos on there. And they range from, most of them probably are power yoga, usually 60-minute power yoga classes. Power yoga is just that, just simply said, is it's moving. We're moving, it's flowing, it's that dance-like style that I was first, introduced to.
You're gonna sweat.
It's a workout, and if you want to work out, then try these classes.
I've never looked at your YouTube channel, but do you have like a starter page? Like, if I were starting yoga, which one of John's classes should I start with?
I do have, on my YouTube channel, I have playlists. And one of the playlists are these 60-minute power classes. Okay. So if you want to just dive in, go for it. Or if you are a yogi and just, you practice or have practiced and you can jump right in and then take one of those classes. Another one I have playlist is soft flow. Now there are a bunch of 60-minute soft flow classes, which just means we're moving more slowly. I have a process where I really break things down as far as getting into a pose that would feel good for your body. Give a lot of variations and modifications. So if you're new to yoga, you can do one of those classes. There's some 60-minute ones, but I have some really short ones too. 12 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, really designed for, hey, you just want a quick practice in the morning or afternoon or something and just want to kind of get it over with. And they're more kind of tutorialized sessions where we're going to do a heart opener and we do like 2 poses, a little breath work, a couple of poses, shavasana, done. That's it. And so those could be a nice introductory methods. And I believe I also have another playlist. There, I think some tutorials. Like for breathing, I have some breathing exercises. I think I have a headstand tutorial. But I would say go to the soft flow classes if you're a beginner.
Yeah, good. Well, that's yoga.
That's yoga.
That's yoga for the gay man at Embody Yoga.
At Embody, and that's the channel. It's Embody Yoga with John Cottrell. I'll put a link in the description if you want to hop on over to to my YouTube channel.
Yeah. We want to walk. I want to say this, even though it's going to show up in July. We just had our Pride Festival last week.
Yeah.
And I want to give a shout out to Russell and to Stephen and to our #1 fan in Colorado, Deborah.
All right, yay.
But it was kind of fun to go to Pride, and we had so many people. Well, I was surprised. People were like, hey, I've seen your videos, or I've seen your things on Instagram. And sometimes when we do this, we think, is anyone listening? And then at Pride, I was like surprised at how many people were responding. We also have a TikTok. So you can find us on Instagram at mindfully_gay.
Yeah.
We're on YouTube.
Yep.
We are on TikTok now.
Yay.
Which has been kind of fun and getting a lot of exposure on TikTok.
Wonderful.
You can find the podcast on Spotify and Apple and other platforms that host podcasts.
That's right.
And then mindfullygay.com is our website. So we're looking forward to seeing people and doing some community events. And please check the website to find out what we have planned.
Yes, thank you so much for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you, talking with you on our next episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast.
Dum-dum.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes, where we continue to explore fascinating topics and share meaningful stories. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next episode.